So you've just finished your beautiful quilt top. Hard part's over, right? Well, now comes the actual scary part, and that's quilting it. You hop online for inspiration and you're hit with hundreds, maybe even thousands of different design options that you can freehand over your quilt. It's completely overwhelming. What if you pick the wrong thing? What if your quilting doesn't look good? What if you mess it up and you ruin hours of work? The fear is real, and it's the reason so many quilt tops end up folded in a cupboard instead of folded on your bed. But what if you didn't have to sift through all of those designs? What if you just mastered a few go-to designs? In this video, I'm going to show you the 3 freehand quilting designs that I would learn today if I was starting afresh. This small, reliable library of designs will enable you to quilt almost any quilt that you see. And the best part is they're really pretty forgiving, which makes them perfect if you're just starting out. Now let's begin with one skill that every quilter I know actually swears by, including me, and that is doodling. Before we even think about touching a quilt, we're going to grab a pen and paper or your iPad. I know you came here to learn quilting, not drawing, but please trust me on this. Every successful free motion quilter starts off this way. Free motion quilting is a lot like learning handwriting. You're teaching your brain and your hands to work together to make smooth, consistent shapes. Doodling and drawing builds that crucial muscle memory without having to waste thread or a precious quilt top. So go ahead, grab a notebook or your iPad, and let's draw our first design. The first design in our little library is a meander. You might also know it as a stipple. It's one single continuous line that wanders across the quilt without ever crossing over itself. Imagine a lazy river or the path of a snake, or I always think of coral when I'm quilting this shape. Now I'm going to be honest with you, the meander has a bit of a reputation problem. Some quilters will tell you it's a bit old-fashioned or a bit boring. They might even see it as a beginner design that you need to outgrow as soon as possible. I'm here to tell you, in my humble opinion, that that's not quite right. The meander is literally one of the most versatile and useful designs that you can master. And one of its superpowers is actually its scalability. Let's say you're quilting a soft cuddly quilt. You can quilt the meander on a really large scale with beautiful wide open curves. This creates a lovely, almost cloud-like texture that keeps the quilt nice and soft and cuddly. Now take that exact same motion and shrink it way down into a micro meander. Tiny, densely packed wiggles. This tight kind of texture around applique really makes designs pop. So I hope you'll give the meander a go. Let's doodle it first. So I've moved onto my iPad here and I'm going to start doodling the meander design. Basically, we're just going to put our pen to paper and wiggle. Move from left to right, up and down, just filling in the space. There's only one rule, and that's don't cross over your lines. If you feel like you're about to get trapped in a corner, change direction and wiggle your way out. This is a really continuous, fluid motion that looks like a winding river, or as I said, I always think of a coral shape when I'm drawing this. Over at the long arm machine now, and it's the exact same idea. Take hold of the handlebars, just start moving the machine in a gentle meandering path. One of my top tips is to keep a really light grip on the handlebars and make sure your shoulders are relaxed. If your body is tense, it will show in your quilting. Now the goal here is smooth curves, not perfect shapes. It takes a little practice, but the meander is really forgiving, so any little wobbles or inconsistencies will just melt into the overall texture. I've quilted this first section in a pretty large meander. Now I'm going to bring the size right down to much more of a micro meander, just to show you it's the same shape, it's just really condensed, and it will give the quilt a really different texture. Also note that all of this quilting is in real time. Okay, now that we've got that foundational curve down, let's switch gears and move to something a little bit more geometric. I like to call our second design geometric boxes. This design is a great training exercise for one of the trickier parts of free motion quilting, and that is moving in a reasonably straight line. We're not aiming for perfection in this design, but we do want to try and get our lines reasonably consistent. Let's go ahead and start doodling this one. This design really is as simple as drawing a reasonably straight line and then turning 90 degrees. We can cross over our lines as many times as you like. You can make squares, rectangles, whatever you like the look of. Now, luckily my quilting is a little bit straighter than my drawing, but even if you're a bit wobbly like this, it really doesn't matter on the quilt. When you're drawing, I also want you to practice not taking your pencil or pen off the page, because that's how we quilt. So one continuous line for the whole design. Now, drawing is also the place to deliberately get yourself stuck in corners or awkward spaces and figuring out how you might fill those in on a real quilt. Over at the machine now, and we're going to take that same concept of drawing a straight line and then branching off at 90 degrees, creating little boxes of squares and rectangles. As I mentioned in the doodling phase, this is completely different from the meander because we definitely want to cross over our lines. You can see the machine helps to keep these lines a little bit straighter than what I managed to draw on the iPad. But they're not perfect, and I'm definitely not aiming for perfection here. It's the overall texture that matters, and when you step back and look at the whole quilt, I promise you those tiny little imperfections will vanish. Such a fun design for a men's quilt or a baby quilt. Really quick to quilt out and really easy for a beginner. Okay, so far we've got a soft curvy design and a sharp, more linear design. Which one feels more natural for you? Let me know in the comments. On to our third design now, and this design is a flower swirl. There are so many variations of this beautiful little design, but we're going to start with the most basic today. The flower swirl creates a gorgeous all over texture that's really pretty fast to quilt once you get the hang of it. It's also another design that scales up or down really easily. Let's start by doodling. Now, as you learn more designs, you'll realize that so many of them start with basic letters of the alphabet that we learnt as cursive handwriting when we were kids. And this one really just starts with a cursive C. Once you've drawn that lovely little inner curl, we're just going to draw some rows of petals around the outside. The petals are a really basic U shape. You can do as many rows around the outside of each flower as you like. And the thing I really love about this design is that it doesn't matter where they land. In fact, the more random, the better. You'll notice that nothing in nature is perfect. So we just want to keep echoing around our inner curl with our petals until your flower is big enough and you're ready to branch off into your next curl. Echoing is really the best way in most designs to get to where you want to go, to either fill in the space or to quilt your next motif. What happens if you get stuck in the corner though, like I'm about to here? So all I would do on a real quilt is either make my echo a little bit smaller or travel along the seam line. Just like here. It just gives the flowers a bit of a 3D feel, like some of the petals are hiding behind the seam. At the machine now, and I've started this first flower with a back to front C. Then we'll quilt our U-shaped petals around the outside. As I said, not worrying in the least about where they land. In fact, the more random, the better. Until I'm ready to branch off and quilt another curl to start another flower motif. Now I really want to get back over to the left-hand side of my quilt here. So I'm just going to travel around. I'll add another row of flowers on my first flower curl so I can get to where I want to go. When you're quilting these kinds of designs, we always want to be thinking about changing up the direction. We don't want all of our flowers to be facing the same way. So think about quilting that first curl facing different directions. One thing I really love about this flower curl design is that it does create the most beautiful texture on your quilts. It's also one of those basic designs that's really easy to change one little thing and you get a completely different look. For example, instead of just a simple C curl in the middle, why don't you try doing a swirl and then those same U-shaped petals? What about doing feather petals instead of the U-shaped petals? Once you've got the basic design under your belt, there are so many ways you can expand on it. So there you have it, a meander, some geometric boxes, and a beautiful flower swirl. With just these 3 motifs, you really do have a pretty full toolbox and options for most of the quilts that you will see. You really don't need to learn hundreds of designs, you just need the right ones. And hopefully these 3 will be ones that you'll come back to again and again. I also want to say, if you're fairly new to free motion quilting, the goal is not to complete a perfect quilt. The goal is to complete a finished quilt. Remember, finished is always better than perfect. So I hope you take these 3 designs, doodle them until they feel like second nature, and then just go for it on your next quilt. If you'd like some more free motion quilting tips, you can download my free guide from below, the sticky note trick, and 6 other things that genuinely improved my free motion quilting. I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll be releasing new videos every week, and happy quilting.